another recording of the Bad Ideas podcast with Carter Dvorak. How'd I do? Did I get it right?
You did great. You got it in one. That's awesome.
Yeah, awesome. We had a little practice and coaching beforehand, so that gets me set. So super excited to have you here. So you're a producer at Filmic Productions. You're at Michigan right now, even though you've been making media for what, 3 years? You said now?
3 years,
Already?
yeah, all the way back in COVID, back when there was
Yeah,
a microphone shortage across the board.
because of you, right? And your show.
Pretty much, yeah. Too many. Yeah.
No, but that's amazing. I feel like the experience you already have of like creating a show, coming up with your own content, promoting it, producing it. You can't go to school to study that stuff. You already have an audience and you've done it on your own, which is amazing. So by the time you're out, you can be so far ahead of everybody else, especially us old farts that figure this out like mid-30s, you know?
Yeah, thank you. It's been a lot of fun. And like it's been on my own, but I've also been surrounded by so many brilliantly creative people, which makes it so fun to collaborate and like grow with each other.
Yeah, we were talking about, so before this, your brilliant creative people are at Michigan, which is in a very unique football situation right now. Any formal commentary from underneath the school umbrella?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think it was kind of wild this whole season, like just kind of came out of left field, right? Because we started without Harbaugh for the first couple games, and we still were just dominating, which was really awesome. Like I think there was maybe a little bit of apprehension, and then by the moment, like we had 4 opening games back to back to back, 4 weekends in a row, which one takes a lot of stamina as a student to make it to those 4 games back to back, but it's a lot of fun every single time. And I think that like just seeing the team being like crush every single time, like kind of quell those worries a little bit and continuing to do so has been nice, but then it's been crazy. It's just continued to kind of pile up with Harbaugh. And I feel like a lot of student sentiment is on his side for sure. And is more just kind of, I think there's some frustration at the situation, but also we've still been able to do really well. Like I'm still really proud of the team. And like, I think that everyone on there they're focused, they're dialed in, and you continue to see that, which is great.
Yeah, we were talking about this before, and so I have a friend, one of my best friends actually is a San Francisco fan. So like that's how I found out about what was going on. And I mentioned I'm a Patriots fan, so we went through Spygate, like a similar situation. I feel like people have a tough time, coping with the fact that someone else just does it better. And sometimes they need to like come up with a reason to justify that. And this seems to be that, because you guys are just dominating.
I know. Like it's the notion of signs. I didn't even know really what sign stealing was. I honestly kind of thought it was like the football team was stealing some street signs, which not from the team, but I've seen that at college. But it's like, it's such a small kind of technicality that like, I mean, yeah, every team does it really. And like, not that it makes anything okay, but it's kind of like the fact that we're getting blasted from a couple different fronts about it is just a little bit wild.
Just because you guys are on top, there's always a target when you're on top, because you can't be that much better. But I think you guys are, which is fun to watch.
It is so fun to watch.
So sweet. So awesome to have you here. I think it's it's fun to brainstorm and react to these things with folks with different perspectives. And you're studying business in school. You're also kind of like your own entrepreneur too. So there's a lot of unique perspective we haven't gotten yet.
Yeah.
Which will be a lot of fun to riff with.
I'm really excited to riff into it. You messaged me about this idea and I was like, this seems like a lot of fun. Like this just seems like a really cool time. I feel like I do this all the time on my own. I think of a lot of bad ideas and how to make them work. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the key message of the show. I never really say this overtly because I want to hook people with the fact that these ideas are ridiculous, because they're ridiculous.
Yeah.
But you've seen Shark Tank before, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I feel like Shark Tank puts a massive amount of emphasis on the idea itself. There's a lot, people pitch VCs, and like a lot of it is, and then a little bit of traction and execution behind the fact. And like what people don't understand is that your ability to execute is worth so much more than like the idea itself.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're kind of trying to indirectly communicate with the show. Like we come up with these ridiculous ideas, but we're able to shape them into things you could actually do, and that's what makes them work, which is the magic of this.
It makes me think of talking about the Shark Tank ideas. You know, the sponge with like the smiley face on it, right? Like, have you not seen that? Oh, I feel like I feel like that's like one of the most massive like Shark Tank pitches, because it's a circular sponge and it's got like a little like the smile and then like two eyes that are kind of different shapes, but they like scrub everything differently. And like, it's such a goofy idea. It's such a
Yeah.
quirky design, but like, I think it's one of the biggest Shark Tank products that there is, because I see them everywhere.
Yeah.
And it is all about communicating that idea, having that confidence. Like, it reminds me, I read a book once, and like the character in the book, they were in like a art design school, and they talked about like they had to make a pitch, and they were like, everyone else was pitching like all the trendy hipster stuff, and then they pitched like a crazy bubble gum, and they're like, if we can sell this, then like you can sell anything. Like, if you can make a bad idea sound and look interesting, that can be like, that's critical.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the execution of selling that takes it there. I got super lucky. I got to work with the founder out of Harvard who started a company his senior year that raised like $6 million. So his first job
No
was like
way.
leading a company with 6 million. Yeah, I met some of my best friends working there, but just watching him walk into rooms with like the CEOs of some of the biggest card brands on the planet and communicate with them, form partnerships with them. Someone who had zero experience in the space. He had a different approach to it that everyone found interesting. Like, kind of opened my eyes to the fact that a lot of experience is stuff that you create on your own. It's not anything you can get anywhere. And
Yeah.
there's no like minimum amount of time. Like, you have to have done this for this period of time before you can create a new business. Like, no, if you think you can do it, you're willing to do the work, you can start, when you're a senior in high school, if you really
Yeah.
want to. So, all right, without further ado, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at this really bad idea. Then we're going to spend 5-10 minutes talking about all the reasons why it's awful. So channel your inner Simon Cowell. And then when we run out of bad stuff to say, we're going to try to turn it into something good. Does that sound good?
Let's do this. I'm excited.
All right, here we go. So here's the bad idea for today. Unbranded product placement. So feature products prominently in stores, but remove all branding and labels, defeating the purpose of product placement.
So this is like, I'm just trying to picture it. So it's just unbranded product placement. So it's just like generic water bottle, right? Like generic cereal, like just no actual brands.
Yeah. I guess, it's a business idea, right? So someone is trying to convince you to remove the brand from your product or pay for placement in an unbranded category.
Yeah. That's interesting. It makes me immediately think of, I don't know if this is maybe a hot topic, but I can think of a social media platform that had a great brand, iconic logo for a very long time. Probably one of the biggest logos you could possibly have. And that new founder and CEO said, you know what? No. And got rid of it. And let's just say the bird flew the coop, if you can pick up what I'm putting down.
Yeah.
And like, that was a bad move. Like, I think that it goes to show that there are some really important brands and logos and icons out there that catch people.
Yeah. Oh, we can talk about Elon and Twitter real quick.
Oh, gosh.
So I have a theory, and none of this is super validated, but if you look at what he's doing, he talks about Mars more than anything. So
yeah,
my little side joke is that he's just trying to go home. He's actually an alien, but
that makes so much sense. That would explain a lot.
Well, he is brilliant. So if you look at what he's doing, he's got Tesla, but then he's got like Boring Company for drilling.
Mm-hmm.
He's got Starlink for deploying internet around a planet or an asteroid if you want to. And he's got SpaceX for transportation. He's building all the infrastructure he needs to go to space. The only thing he doesn't have access to is unlimited money. And you look at like Tesla and SpaceX, a lot of their financing comes from the government or offsets. But to go to space, you're going to need so much more. Plus, any government that gives you money is going to want their flag in anything you do.
Yeah.
Like, that's the next big frontier. So I think what he's doing with X, as much as it's like, I think he does kind of believe in free speech, I think he's going to use that to crowdsource. So I think X is not supposed to be a social platform. It's just a place that has a lot of attention that, he's going to turn into a bank of some sorts. And they did file like all the regulatory components they need to turn it into a bank or to have its own bank. So like, think of GoFundMe, except with Twitter's audience, like funding rockets going into space to mine. That's what I think he's trying to put together.
Maybe that would be, if that's the end game, that's wild. And that'd be a crazy, like, long-term plan. I could definitely see that. I mean, I know he's got to make up some money with it first, but if that's a possibility, you do know, like, those those who've stuck around on that platform are definitely pretty like loyal and committed to it. And like I guess you could see that with the way he was trying to monetize verification. So it could be
We,
maybe that's a long term.
you look at their financials, like he's never going to make money on the 44 billion. Like
No,
that's just, it's gone. But if he uses it to crowdsource like unlimited capital direct from citizens, like, that justifies unlimited spend, right? Like if you get $1 trillion in Dogecoin, like,
hoodie, is that possible? I wonder. Like
oh, he's gonna try. He's gonna try
he's
for
gonna
sure.
try.
And now
Yeah.
you and I are the first people on video talking about it, so this will be a
Look at
thing.
this. We called it. They're gonna come back to this. So like episode 30 of the Bad Ideas podcast. We called it all. Yeah.
That was it. All right. So back to our like awful
Bad idea.
business.
Yeah.
So bad idea is non-branded product placement. Every marketing director is going to fire you immediately. Like no one is going to
Immediately.
authorize you to remove the brand, right?
Yeah. I
Because
mean,
how do you differentiate? Like how do you even know what the product is? It just generic.
yeah. You just have to like it's blind faith, which is weird. Like, because I'm like maybe there's a way to distinguish it over time if you know like the shape of like if there's just a shelf of water bottles or beverages, right? Like you can eventually be like, I noticed the can shape, but even then, like you're not gonna know anything. You're not gonna know what you want. You're not gonna have any ability to like go like this store is gonna fail, right? Like any store that adopts this model isn't gonna have like nobody's gonna want to shop there because nobody's gonna know what they're getting. Like it's chaos.
Yeah. And I mean, there's no feedback loop either, right? Because it's
Yeah,
non-branded, so people can't know if the one that they bought was the one that they liked or not. They can just, like you said, they only go by the bottle, but if it's totally generic, you have to read the label to know which was which, and you have to bring it with you to know which one to buy, right?
right. And like maybe this isn't within the branding, but like if there's no labels at all, like nobody knows what's in there. Like
Yeah.
that's really scary. Like think of all this like the metal cans of soup with no notion of what you're gonna have. Like
It's a roulette.
it's a roulette every single time. Like the days of knowing that you're getting chicken noodle are over. Like, yeah,
I I think that would be a really, really bad idea. My read on this one is that they do have to list the ingredients and at least
okay,
tell you what it is, but there's no like the branding is removed.
yeah,
It seems like a really weird way to do a controlled experiment.
it does.
We're going to put you alongside all of your competitors and nobody's going to know who's who, and consumers are going to decide purely based on what's actually in it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting potential there, but I think still it's, as you said, any brand manager, marketing director will immediately fire you. There is no potential for any interesting marketing campaigns, which,
Yeah.
like, outside of being good ways to sell products, are sometimes just fun to engage with. Like, there's no way to sell, like, to have fun commercials, to have fun slogans or iconography or collaborations with products. Like, it's just basically all the same companies with no distinction. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's pure performance decision making, right?
Yeah.
So like the brand isn't even a factor. It's literally like, do you like this one better or not, without knowing who made it.
And I think when we circle back to maybe some later chats, there's some interesting things with that. But in the meantime, like
Yeah,
there are so many brands that are kind of the same but different fonts. Like, you ever walked into
yeah,
like a Costco, right? And like everything Kirkland brand, there's another version of that that's not Kirkland that is almost identical, but it just has, different branding, different packaging and things. So I think that makes it really hard too, even when it is forced to differentiate between the two if they're ostensibly the same product.
yeah.
Like,
I think what we're doing indirectly now is just validating the importance of brand.
I think so.
And you need a negative experience like this where it's purely the value the product delivers that kind of creates where you are. The
Yeah.
brand, people often, I'm in the marketing sphere, so
Hmm.
people often try to find a mathematical way to assign value to a brand, and it's hard in the context of other marketing channels because you can measure pretty much everything else.
Right.
Like you can see if you're getting clicks, you can see what kind of reach and return you're getting on things, but like brand on its own you can't measure until you're in a scenario like this where if the brand is not there, how well is it selling against known competitors, which is interesting. It's like you have to remove it to understand its value. which nobody
Yeah.
wants to do.
Nobody wants to do it. It would be a fascinating experiment as like a marketing experiment. That would be really cool. If I have a chance to do research, I might keep this idea in the back of my mind.
There you go.
And it also reminds me of, I don't know if you know of the work of Dr. Marcus Collins at all. He's a
No.
professor at the business school at Michigan, and he was an engineering degree. He went and did a lot of like music work, and then he ended up working with like Beyonce, worked at Jay-Z's like marketing firm. He's worked with Apple, a lot of massive clients. And he recently published a book tying marketing really, really deeply to culture, to like psychology and culture and how people find community
Yeah.
and how brands and marketing are a massive element in the way that people self-identify, the way that they come together, the way that they find communities and spheres. And so like I'm thinking about it from this cultural lens where there's connection and unity. You know, we were talking about even football teams and sports teams and the way that they market
Yeah.
or in products, like so much of that builds such a strong foundation of people. And like, you know, in unbranded products, you have no ability to even build any of that connection, which means you lose on like word of mouth marketing. You lose on so many other pieces of marketing outside of just like general designs and the way that brands are already established.
I mean, good point and smooth anchor back to football,
Yeah.
bringing us full circle. But I was just at, I'm in South Florida. I was just at the Miami Raiders game this
Mm-hmm.
past weekend, which is really wild because half the people who are with our party were Raiders fans, like visiting,
Mm-hmm.
and totally wild fan base, like people wearing plastic armor and like helmet gear and
In the Miami
like the
Sun too.
intense. Yeah, in the Miami Sun, so they're sweating like crazy. But when you're talking about like tribalism and how you identify with the brand and it connects you to a community, like that immediately came to mind because you have people who don't know each other at all, and you have some really strange looking people, particularly in my like just strange looking people that are instantly friends because they're both rooting for the same team and they're like, arm in arm screaming. It was a really good game. So like
Yeah.
near comeback at the end, and these people are sharing a really emotional, like powerful experience just because they happen to like the same team in the same spot, which is huge. It comes back to you guys too, like you're killing everybody you go to the school, like that's
Yeah.
a part of you forever.
It is. It's a massive part of conversation. It's always, are you going to the game? What are you doing for the like? It's so many conversations about that. There's so many conversations about the football players, and even like there's a couple of them just in class, and I feel like it always comes up. Like people are always so curious, like what's it like behind the scenes? Like I have a football player on my project team in one of my classes, and it's so interesting to hear his POV on everything. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Do you play? Are you an NFL fan at all, or is it just?
it's much more college teams. I've
Yeah.
always kind of been the person where like I am the biggest fan of the team that I'm like directly affiliated with, like high school, college, and things like that. NFL, I just maybe when I get older, like when I'm in like a different area or town, and when it's
You don't
not
have a
just
school, yeah.
when I don't have a school, and maybe it's not just rooting for the Lions. Like I think that
Yeah.
it's a fun community to be a part of for sure. But I think I love it when it's really, really close to home, when I can
Yeah.
identify people on the field that I maybe see in the day to day, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's a powerful. I'm jealous. Like, never had anything like that. But
Yeah.
no, bring it back to NFL. I think fantasy football is kind of like
Yes.
our experiment. You like remove the brand of the team, and you're just betting on the player. And like it's funny, the second you do that, you start grabbing people from teams that you never even watch. You're just looking at their stats, like, oh, this guy's actually interesting. And
Mm-hmm.
this is precisely why brand managers don't want to remove the brand, because then you start shopping outside of the walled garden they've built for you.
Exactly. Like it would be. I really like the comparison to fantasy. You're right, because it looks at different players and teams, and even sometimes within fantasy though, if you remove the brand entirely, like I have Jake Moody on my fantasy team right now because he was a kicker for Michigan. Like I know that history
Yeah.
because he saved our rear ends last year in one of the most nail biting games I've ever watched. It was like it was a final play of the game and he scored the winning field goal. It was crazy. Even then, it still seeps its way into it. But yeah, you're right. I think fantasy is a great way of looking at it. And you're also very right. Like it's a big risk for the companies themselves because people
Uh,
might realize there's maybe better alternatives to what they had. And it is going all on merit, which I think is interesting. And I think at some point you do lose some, again, that a brand identification, which I think is a factor as well of like losing some community, losing some rallying points. People are so connected to brands. I have a Kirkland crew neck. I see people wearing so many other, like, there's Taco Bell t-shirts. There's all
Yeah.
these other brands out there. So losing that point of connection to the customer and then to the community is really tough. It's a bad idea, man.
Yeah. Well, another big brand that actually is doing this, Hyundai has the Genesis brand.
I don't know about the Genesis brand, no.
Yeah. So, I mean, how like Honda has Acura,
Hmm?
Nissan has Infinity, that like they have their luxury brands. Hyundai's is Genesis, but it's like super subtle branding.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
not obviously a Hyundai product. And one of their like luxury line cars looks exactly like an S-Class Mercedes. So
Yeah.
when you see it, and I think they're doing the same thing because they removed the Hyundai logo, you see it and you're like, oh, it's a Mercedes. And you like mentally put it kind of on that level. And by doing that, they've kind of indirectly mooched off of Mercedes's brand equity and like moved themselves into a category they couldn't break into because their brand is associated with like, cheaper, potentially different quality level cars.
Hmm.
Again, and formally on the record, I think car quality is an extremely subjective thing
Yeah.
because everyone makes pretty good vehicles at this point. Like they're all pretty like reliable. If you take care of them, they'll last forever. But I think the perception, like people see Hyundai and they think of, I got a friend in high school who had I forget what, like an Elantra or something, a little teeny red thing. And
Yeah.
he slid off the road and like bumped into a tree going like 5 miles an hour, not fast. And the right door fell off. Like he hit the tree with the front of his car and the right door fell off.
Oh, no.
So he came to visit the next day and the door was like sticking out the side because he hadn't taken it to the shop to get it. But that's what I think of when I think of
Huh?
Hyundai. But now, too long to name later,
Yeah.
they're pretty good cars. And now they have a brand that's competing with Mercedes. And they did that by removing their brand, like a bad idea.
Yeah. You make a really good point. I think that I also noticed that in some of maybe the emerging vehicles as well, especially like some of the emerging EVs. I don't know if you've seen much of
Yeah.
Rivian. We had a whole project for one of my courses where we basically took like 2 weeks and dissected everything about Rivian and had to make the consumer value proposition for them. And like, so I got to research the company a lot. And I was like, as a new company, as a new car brand where you don't have that prior association, it gives you a lot of potential to like set themselves up in a really interesting way where they can like at that point do that. But you're right, like it's so fascinating how companies can continually change and evolve and make different value propositions for different parts of vehicles, for cars, for example, and they can really target so many different groups.
Yeah. It seems like we're naturally inching towards good ideas. You want to put the creative hat on?
I think that we should. I think it's been slowly inching that way. And I think that the first thought with it is like, maybe it's not the worst thing in the world to measure things by merit, you know? Maybe that allows us to discover some of the better products and like sometimes I think brand loyalty is cool and I think in a lot of ways it's great, but in a lot of ways it's constrictive. And so I
Yeah.
think you said a really great way of like, the brand set up a little garden for you to play around in, but jumping the fence, like there's maybe some grass greener on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever, I don't even know if they still do this, the Coke versus Pepsi challenge. You
I
ever
don't know
seen
about
that
the
or done it?
challenge. I know the rivalry, but what's the challenge?
So they used to do this thing. One second, I dropped my pen. I need to fidget with something while I'm talking.
Dude, I feel that.
It's like it's in my hand perpetually while I'm thinking, keeps me focused. But they used to do this thing where, I think because Coke was so dominant in the soda space, even though Pepsi was massive, it was thinking about itself as a challenger brand. And what they would do is they would put these like white sleeves on the two different soft drinks
Mm-hmm.
and serve you like a shot of each, and you'd try to guess which one was better. And I think they'd water down the Coke, but you'd always choose Pepsi. And then
Yeah.
they'd show you and be like, it's Coke and Pepsi. And that was their way of kind of doing exactly what we're talking about, but to
Mm.
solidify in people's minds that like you actually like Pepsi has 20 grams more of sugar, so you like it better, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. That reminds me of another example I saw. I think it was some
yeah,
kind of commercial where they had like it was I'm blanking on the brand, which is unfortunate, but it was like it might have been like Zappos. Like it was a shoe company that like they made like kind of low price luxury clothing. And they like did this thing where like we invited all of like New York elite to this like
yeah,
fake luxury store and made them spend thousands and thousands of
yeah.
dollars on shirts that you can buy for 30. And again, it was one of those things. It's like in that surprise reveal of like, you just bought clothes from this company. It's crazy. Like it's such interesting thing, and it kind of shows that the crazy ways in which brands can really articulate themselves and make incredibly expensive products for things that are the same at $30, but they just have a different logo or a different name.
Yeah. I mean, it's Apple 101, right? Like
Yeah,
we'll release almost the exact same hardware, but charge 3 times as much because it's got a little Apple on it.
it's got a little Apple on it. It's got the fancy little boxes. Yeah.
I do think to their credit, like the contained operating system
Oh yeah,
gives them like a little teeny bit of justification because you need to have their hardware to get into that, and it's still pretty good.
it is. And
But
like,
like,
I'll give it to
yeah, go
Apple
for it.
too. They make it a pain to text anybody with an Android.
Yeah,
Like they make sure that if you,
walled garden,
yeah,
you know.
like they will make you, because I do this because I pester my friends with Androids and I go like, can you just switch so we can name the group chat, please? I'm like, I have
Yeah,
17 different text chats with you because we have to add somebody and I have to make it from the jump. And the person, if you're listening to this, you know exactly who you are. But like, it's so funny that I'm like, but I think I'm like, this is Apple's fault. Like, I'm sure they can make it easier to text somebody with an Android,
they don't
but they
want to.
don't. They don't want to.
Yeah, I mean, like they're turning you into an influencer by making it painful, right? So like
Yeah.
you're now a free advocate for Apple because they made it painful,
Mm-hmm.
which is absolutely a strategy, right? Um, yeah, but you think about like phones is a great one. If you put every phone side by side,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, have you ever held like one of the new Galaxy phones like next to your iPhone and just looked at the screen difference?
I don't know if I have. I've held like some of the Android phones and I have noticed a difference, but not the new Galaxy.
Yeah, it's just the top of the line Samsungs. Their screen is like super high res. It's way faster refresh rate, so it moves a lot smoother. It looks like another class of phone, but it costs like $400.
Wow.
It's really wild. But again, you think about the green text, and even though that's a line of code that costs them no money to maintain,
Uh-huh.
it's there, it's infinitely scalable. Because they put that there, you're going to continue to spend an extra 400 phone because you want to have blue text instead of green.
Exactly.
It's brand loyalty, man.
And
By
loyalty.
making like controlling other brands' appearance within your marketplace. Walled gardens are devastating.
Well, it really is devastating. It essentially, I've seen some collaboration. I know there was one. The AirTag was kind of a cool example of how like I was, I think, the first time Apple and Google and they've all kind of worked together for
Yeah.
safety purposes, really, so that you can, so Google can now notice when there's an AirTag around and ping you in the same way that Apple phones would, which is nice. But it's a funny thing to see a little bit of collaboration. I bet that's going to be the minimum because I think that was pretty much mandatory.
Yeah.
Well, essentially, it would be a smart play because it's like for safety purposes. But back to the topic at hand, like maybe this does help a little bit on, like non-branded product placement. I think would help you kind of figure that out more. I mean, but will there still be capabilities maybe that would make it distinguishable between the brands eventually?
Well, I think it's a huge benefit if you're the challenger brand. I think the big guys
Yeah.
would never go for it, but imagine a scenario where you're the challenger brand. Um, Tell us right now, what company are you going to start when you graduate?
Oh
What kind of
gosh.
brand are you going to make? And then we'll hold you to this. So you have to actually do it.
Hold me to this. I'll go with a brand that I've thought of for a long time, which is I want to make a new challenger podcast hosting social media platform.
All right. Podcast hosting, social media. It has, well, it does kind of have product placement.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all right. So product placement for an electronic product is like a
Yeah.
comparison shopping engine. So like G2 or Capterra or Alternative to like any of those websites. So if it were to be non-branded, it'd be like raw feature list.
Yeah.
And like people just kind of comparing what does what. Um, Imagine if you could fund a trial on all of the other products in a
Mm-hmm.
non-branded capacity. So imagine a scenario where like this business that we're creating, the non-branded product placement, people pay and you as the brand pay to give people comparative trials in all of their competitors in some kind of like face removed capacity. So you're paying for their access to other tools than yours,
Yeah.
but the value you get is no competition. Like because you're funding all of that, now they're rawly going to compare the features that you offer to the features everyone else does. without looking at the brand that's attached to that, that's a pretty powerful thing. I mean,
Yeah.
in software, there's a lot more you'd have to actually build. But you think about it in a store, you could literally just pay somebody to remove the labels,
Hmm.
like remove the brands from labels and put it in your section so you can compete directly with them. And I
Yeah.
think, the brands might try to ban this once they figure out what you're doing. But if you're funding it and you're paying for the real estate as the challenger brand and you're buying the product, I feel like, any major retailer would kind of like that. It becomes
Yeah.
an attraction for people to sample or compare, right?
It really does. I think it could be its own retailer. Like I think I see that as a premise to its own store, online or even brick and mortar. Like I could easily see that being like it's a novelty, but it's also beneficial because like you walk in and it's just descriptions and there's no brand labels. And I think that there's a way to get the big brands on top, which I think might be playing into egos a little bit by being like, so you're scared. So you think that you're not going to hold up to the challenger when everything's removed. Like maybe there's a way to kind of be like, I think there's a way further from the challenges to be like, let's say you're Pepsi and you do this and Coca-Cola doesn't, be like, so yeah, so Coca-Cola didn't want to put their money on the table, right? Like they didn't want to put their money where their mouth is and actually do this. And I think that in itself adds to the challenger brand one way or the other.
Yeah. I think in addition to your podcast offer, you need to start some kind of consulting firm to feed challenger brands with these kind of bad ideas. Because I think this is good stuff. And I think if you have the confidence to go out there and say that,
Yeah,
people just before they even try your product, they're going to look at you differently because they're like, whoa,
right.
like you must be sure you've got something better if you're saying that about them.
Yeah. And that is the thing. The challenger has to really know that this is going to go well. Otherwise, because there's a big risk there of just kind of wind up getting smoked by the ones on top. But if that doesn't happen, then you really have something there. So it takes
Yeah.
a lot of confidence on both ends.
Yeah. So we'll kind of wrap with a little story. So I have a friend who works at the venture studio at General Mills.
Okay.
And they actually, well, it's not non-branded. They create brands, but they actually do this with your
Really?
products. So they'll create like a little startup brand and assign 2 or 3 people to it, and they'll go put it out in market. They start online, and then they'll actually test in retail. But this is how they figure out like what to bring into their production line by like putting all these no names out there and figuring out like what people flock to
Mm-hmm.
and what actually establishes traction. Which it's not entirely the same as non-branded, but it's like they don't put General Mills on it. So you don't know that it's them,
Right.
but they can go out there and put a lot of challenger products into market way faster than startups or challengers could to figure out what the next thing is going to be before they even decide to invest in it and double down and actually put their name on it. So like there is something here. It's more of an internal thing than an external thing. So like it'd be very difficult to go sell a company a placement in a non-branded location. But if you are the challenger, creating a scenario where your brand is not an asset or a deterrent for you can be very advantageous, especially if you have something that's better, like the
Yeah,
Michigan football team.
exactly. And I think it brings us all back to kind of what you were talking about, which is like when you have that brand and like when you can look at it that way, I'm like the words all click together. There we go. So like when you have a brand and like that when you're trying to measure what value does a brand add? Like it's so
Mm-hmm.
hard to just look at like what value does having General Mills in the corner of your cereal box do? Like it's hard to determine that, hard to measure that, as we said at the very beginning. But it's like this is the one way in which you can, and the one way in which you can be like, without any General Mills, we still get this many sales. And then if they like actually implement that, and then they can be like, and with General Mills, we get this many. That's a
Yeah.
really fascinating way to actually get a measured value of what this brand looks like.
Yeah. Came up with a brand metric. You'll have to trademark this before you graduate.
Before the episode goes live, honestly.
We'll call it the Dvorak index.
Oh, hello. I like that.
Yeah, right. Like we came up with something else bad. This is great. Look, man. I'm really grateful you came on. You have some awesome ideas. Please hire me as your butler when you hit it big after you graduate. A lot of good stuff. How do people follow you if they want to keep track of what you're putting out there and get in touch when you're
Yeah.
ready and available for consulting on bad stuff?
Absolutely. And Nick, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been so fun to chat. Again, I love this idea. I love this show. So it's so cool. To contact me, I would say the big thing, if you want to hear more of my ramblings, a lot of them more college
Yeah.
focused, whether it's college sports, academics, talking about professors, even other content creators. Even I talked to a DJ in Michigan Stadium. I host a podcast called Student Council. Council is like COU and SEL, so it's kind of like student counseling, students giving each other advice. You can hear that. New episodes out every single week. It's such a fun time to talk to students and other creators. And honestly, Nick, I think I'll have to have you on and talk about your studies as well and how you've gone from there to here, because I love those stories. That's the biggest way to contact me. Feel free to link in with me. I've drawn over the hurdle of 500 plus connections, which is like a big thing. That's always a big stride to hit. So those are two big ways to follow me. My Instagram is just Carter Dvorak, all one word. So feel free to follow me there as well.
Cool. Thank you. We'll have to have you on again. I think I'm going to do some kind of panel. And we're going to we've had some unbelievable like business leaders on the last week and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So like a couple of them, and then you from the other side of things, like studying this and, being in an awesome football school. And I think that'd be a nice diverse palette of perspectives.
Totally.
But we'll have to have some like greatest hits bad ideas for that one. So we'll get you back on. This is awesome. Thanks for making time. We'll do it again soon.
Let's totally do it again soon. Thank you so much. It was a blast.